which is also where educators play a massive role. Through your podcast and your audience, the teachers have such an important role to play in this. That emotion regulation is that first step. Kids come back from the playground, from lunchtime, heavily dysregulated from a huge argument or a disagreement, or first lesson of the day, bringing whatever's happened at home into the classroom. Rather than leaving this to the wellbeing staff or the school psychologists or the counsellors, every teacher or educator can play a role in that, in being able to help them regulate those emotions to enter into conflict in a healthier way.
Hello and welcome to Blooming Curious, the podcast dedicated to reimagining early childhood education through the power of curiosity. We explore the strategies that inspire a lifelong love for learning in children. So if you're an educator or a curious parent looking for creative, meaningful ways to engage children and move beyond the talk and chalk traditional classroom approach, then this is the podcast for you. Today on Blooming Curious, we welcome not one but two special guests. Scholl and David Berlinski are the founders of Toolbox Education. Toolbox brings evidence-based programs to schools, equipping children and teens with practical tools they need to improve their mental health. Today, we're going to talk about how we can improve children's mental well-being, create optimal conditions for learning in the classroom and at home for students in the context of their mental health, and how we can help our children and students manage anxious thoughts, prevent meltdowns, and deal with conflict. So welcome to Blooming Curious, Ben and David. It's great to have you here today.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks so much.
So can you share the story behind Toolbox Education and what inspired you to focus on mental health and well-being for children and educators?
So around about 3.5, 4 years ago, we were in the midst of lockdown here in Melbourne and the craziness of the COVID-19 pandemic. And we were just seeing across the country rising rates of, poor mental health amongst young people. They were trapped in their bedrooms, sitting on social media or on their laptops in their bedrooms. And at that time, David, who's a clinical psychologist, had really long wait times to see him. And when we put our heads together and thought about this problem, it didn't really make sense to us that all these people, especially young people, had to wait to go see a psychologist to learn all these incredible tools to deal with anxiety or their emotions or anything to do with their mental health. It just didn't make sense to us that wait time was happening. We thought, what if we could take all those amazing tools that a young person would learn with a psychologist and teach them to the kids before they need it in ways that Gen Z can really relate to? We're going to put the young people of Australia in a far better position with their mental health. And so that's how it started. And we realized that if we were going to share these tools with young people, they had to be really fun and relatable and done through workshops, not lectures or seminars. And we certainly in the early days were, how would you say it? Just
Probably to a very theory-heavy academy was very excited to share my psych knowledge, but we very quickly learned in the classroom, students value the learning, but it needs to be taught in a fun, engaging, relatable way. And that way they'll pay attention, that way they'll get involved and see the benefit and value of the tools that we're teaching them.
Awesome. What I've discovered in my years of teaching is they don't actually enjoy sitting still at a desk and listen to you lecturing them. They like to get involved and active in their learning. That's been my experience. And one of the reasons why I changed the way I teach is because children enjoy being active in their learning and learning in hands-on ways. Tell me, what did you find were the most common mental health challenges that affect students today in classrooms?
Absolutely. So there are a few ones that come to mind for me. Number one, it's got to be anxiety and anxious thoughts. We are seeing such a rise in students and kids feeling anxious in the classroom, amongst their peers, at home, how they're performing, what are people thinking of them, are they good enough, predicting the future, thinking that everything's going to go terribly, so they don't end up having a go or trying, that fear of failure, all of that kind of falls really neatly into that. that umbrella of anxiety.
Where do you think that comes from, David? Where does this anxiety stem from?
Great question. I mean, it comes from many places, but a way to think of it is that it is like developmentally appropriate in a sense. And if we think of anxiety as another way to think of it is almost like the fancy word for it is projections, right? Like kind of projecting in my mind the world. What are the people thinking of me? And if you're a kid, developmentally, it's really important to fit in. That is how teenagers, especially as they're entering adolescence, how to make sense of the world. How are my friends viewing me? How I sit in my school? All of those things. And it's just kind of taking that and really magnifying it. You've got social media obviously being a huge amplifier of this, but that you're really seeing that in the classroom, just that anxiety, how people perceive me, what are people thinking of me? And that just plays on and on in our minds. Anxiety about things that have happened in the past, and also almost predictive anxiety. So will I stuff that? How will I go in this test? Should I apply for that job, whatever it might be? And it's just wrong around.
And that's quite interesting because last week I took a group of children outside because I'm a very big proponent of getting outside for learning, outdoors, and I took them outdoors and they were doing sort of nature art, transient art, just with found objects. And I actually interviewed them. I asked them how they felt. And these were kids in year 3. And the comments I got were, we feel so much happier outside. And one of the children said, I feel more relaxed. I said, well, why? Why do you feel more relaxed? You know, in the classroom, you're always worried. You're always worried about your work and you're always worried about your grades and you're always worried about, you know, if you're doing the right thing. And that was actually quite profound because I thought these are year 3s and they are already having anxious thoughts about performance. And that to me was quite concerning that a year 3 student should be worrying about grades and performance, you know, when they really should just be focusing on just learning, but having fun with it. They shouldn't be having to worry in year 3.
Absolutely, Edwina. Just add to that. I mean, you kind of described it so nicely. I think when kids are active and they're learning or being present, and just like you said, being in nature, they're just embodied, right? In their body, they're doing things, they're active. They don't have time to ruminate and worry about things. They're just doing it and they're learning, they're making mistakes as they go, but that's kind of part of the process. I think it's often when all of us, but probably especially kids, when we're sitting still, when we're not actually just having a go and trying, that's when the anxiety starts to really grow and fester, as opposed to like, just do it, have a go and make a mistake.
And I'm sure we will talk about strategies in a little while, but I do also know that that is one of the things that many children, especially high flyers, like the kids that are really, really want to do well, they are so terrified of making mistakes. And very often as teachers, we have to put processes in place where we're telling them that mistakes are good. You know, the people who've, you know, invented things, scientists, they didn't do it first time. You have to make mistakes and you go into the whole thing about your brain grows. Every time you make a mistake, you're learning from it. And that actually makes you smarter. So ask questions and make mistakes. So you have to sort of make it as if it's a good thing, celebrate mistakes, because a lot of them are too scared to even have a go. And that's another thing I think as a teacher, you really have to focus very much on getting that mindset right for kids that not yet, I don't know it yet, but I will get there. So they're stunted in their growth because they're afraid, right? And goodness knows where that comes from. But wonderful that you guys are actually doing something to help those kids. I'm wondering about communication. What role does that play in helping children to also diffuse conflicts? Because yes, they're anxious, but another thing that makes them very anxious are relationships. And that's another thing that I've seen very often. In fact, I said to the kids, I know why you want to come to school. And they went, why? And I said, it's not because of learning, is it? They all smiled. Oh my gosh, you'd think I was like some kind of prophet. And I said, I bet you the reason you come to school is for, and they all said it, friends. They're only there for friends. They're not actually at school to learn. Children come to school to socialize. And that is the bottom line. And so friendships play a really big role. And in that is conflict because they struggle with making friends. How can teachers and I guess even parents, because you have sibling rivalry and you have conflicts in your own home and issues when the kids come home because they come and tell you about the person on the playground who doesn't want to play with them. What role does communication with your children play in that, and how can we help them?
A huge amount. It plays a massive role. And I think the first part of your question actually links back to what we were just talking about in terms of failure and, being terrified of making mistakes. Like you said, often school refusal and not wanting to show up to school is linked to those friendship dramas and those conflicts.
Mm-hmm.
But what we're seeing more and more in the classrooms and what students tell us and teachers tell us is that emotional muscle that should be developed in teenage years or preteen years around conflict and relationships and communication just isn't being developed in the same way anymore. Because students aren't communicating with their peers and their friends like they would have 10, 20, 50 years ago, you'll hardly see a young person pick up the phone and call someone anymore. In fact, it comes up in our workshops where students cringe at the idea of having to call someone and rehearse the lines in their head before doing so, or even having a chat with someone on the phone, like would be normal for, older age groups. So that communication skill or that muscle of even having a face-to-face conversation with someone is now replaced by typing or sending emojis or whatever it is online. So they're not training that. And therefore, when conflict does arise in a face-to-face setting, they're far less equipped with the tools to be able to say what they feel, what they think, and how they believe the conflict should be resolved and what it meant to them.
And Edwin, I'll just add to that nerd out, the psych stuff and the developmental stuff again. If we think about it, again, developmentally, kids, it's all about just fitting in and survival. And the biggest thing, again, you see that friendship's the most important relationship in kids' lives at that stage, right? When we get a bit older, it becomes your partner, your parent, your family. But when you're in that stage, no one else matters. It's just friendships. So, yeah, there's a real crisis there, a tension of, oh my goodness, the people who mean the most to me, and I really need to fit in, but there's conflict. Like, I have feelings towards them that are really uncomfortable. Maybe I'm feeling hurt or angry with them. And it's really hard for kids to kind of reconcile this. I mean, very hard for adults as well. So what do kids do? I mean, kids go down a few pathways. One, they ignore it. It's just very easy to avoid the conflict of, well, no, I can't be angry at them. They're my friend, even maybe they were hurt or they were excluded. So that's option one. Just pretend like there's no conflict and then we don't have to feel anxious about this. Option number two, which some people do is, an optional model, we call that being passive in our relationships, passive communication, just not addressing your needs, ignoring them. Option number two is on the flip side, which we call being aggressive, where we just steamroll the other person. We go, how dare you hurt me? What's wrong with you? I can't believe you did this. Why did you do this to me? And naturally, you can see there's going to be issues in your friendships down the line there where you're only considering your wants and you're not really thinking about your friends. And what we try and teach in our workshops, and also I do in the therapy room, how do we find that sweet spot of assertive communication? How do we go, no, my feelings and needs matter, so do my friends, and they're on the equal level playing field, and how do we address it and communicate in a way where it's on me to communicate it because my feelings in it. How do I do it in a way that's not going to shut down my friend, that my friend can actually be on board with this, they can hopefully hear me, respond to me. And then once we're sort of heard and seen, anxiety drops, we feel a bit more calm, that those emotions pass through us, and hopefully the conflict's resolved. And we say in our workshops too, like you need conflict in relationships. It's important. Like it's a healthy, important part of a relationship because it's inevitable. You're two people, two friends, whatever it is, who get along most of the time, that inevitably will clash. And really, it's not about having no conflict. It's how do we actually resolve this in a way that we're feeling heard and understood. That's going to really set all of us up for success.
I think as a early childhood and elementary teacher, the things that I see most often children being passive. It's the opposite. It's very much children expressing how they feel, actually. They tell them exactly how they feel. And yeah, sometimes it's not very kind, but I think at the other end, and I sometimes think, my goodness, I would never, when I was that age, I would be the passive person. I would have just kept quiet, walked away. But these kids today, I'm finding a lot of them are very vocal, but they just say the wrong thing. It's very almost, it's about me. And there's a lot of blame always. I find this very like, you did this, you did that, your fault language. And so what I have found in especially the last 2 years where I've been teaching specifically health is that as teachers, we have to give them the language to use. And I don't know if you found that or is that what you do in your workshop, but I found that they need the language. We have to be modeling, these are the words you use, and actually get them to practice that communication, that process. Is that something that you guys have felt or found, or is that what you do, or have we been doing it all wrong, some of us?
No, definitely. That's a huge part of our workshops. I mean, especially, and even as soon as someone hears the phrase you, I'm already on the defense.
Yeah, they get to answer.
I'm already,
exactly.
It feels directive. It feels like it's an attack on my character and who I am. And what we try and separate is there's a big difference between my friend and my friend's behavior. I can focus on what my friend's done to me. They're going to be a bit more aligned. They're going to be a bit more receptive. We're going to be able to figure and navigate this conflict. If I start saying you first, I don't know, it's too late. So we really encourage students instead to use that. It's really foundational, but I feel that. That's how we're feeling. And then it's really specific when we did this. And the third part is it ties into that transport, assertive communication, or how to communicate effectively, whatever statements. And then also asking for repair. So next time. And that's the whole point of it. And this is the missing piece. Like you're saying, kids are very good now at saying you did this and then leaving it out. The whole point of why we communicate in our relationships is to make it better next time. If we're just saying you did this, and then leaving it, we just get points and feeling upset when someone's hurt us. You've got to have that second part, which is, okay, this is how I'm feeling when you did this, but I'm wondering next time, can we please work on this?
And kids are really good at understanding how it's going to affect them. But, in earlier years, less proficient with empathy skills and understanding how the other person feels. So framing it in a way that, we'll often start with, who here wants to improve their relationships for themselves. That's when they start to buy in and go, if I use this tool in this way, or if I use these words, my relationship's going to be better. Not necessarily because I'm altruistically wanting the other person to feel better about it, but I can benefit from this too.
Yeah. I think a big piece of it too is we need to be able to communicate effectively and assertively, but underneath that, we have to be regulated emotionally. Like so many of us, when we're upset, we get a 0 to 100. I mean, we use the metaphor of a Coke bottle. Our Coke bottle's exploded. And we're not actually, our thinking brain isn't online for us to actually use the right words because we're upset, we're feeling hurt, we're feeling attacked. So we're also teaching healthy emotional regulation so that we can stay cool, calm, collected and find the right words as well to navigate conflict.
Which is also where educators play a massive role. Through your podcast and your audience, the teachers have such an important role to play in this. That emotion regulation is that first step. Kids come back from the playground, from lunchtime, heavily dysregulated from a huge argument or a disagreement, or first lesson of the day, bringing whatever's happened at home into the classroom. Rather than leaving this to the wellbeing staff or the school psychologists or the counselors, every teacher or educator can play a role in that, in being able to help them regulate those emotions to enter into conflict in a healthier way.
And the reason why, just as I'm thinking, user-wise, in our workshop, we go and we ask the students, take a step forward if you've ever said something to a friend in the heat of the moment that you later regret. And they all step forward, and we've all done that. And then not only have they hurt their friend once they're a bit more regulated, but then they also feel quite guilty and down and self-critical. This is what we do. If we can be proactive and prevent those outbursts and inability and encourage students to communicate in a healthy, effective way, there'll still be conflict, but we can view conflict as actually what they are, which is opportunities to get closer and connect. Like flipping and viewing another way. Thank you for having conflict. Wow, thank goodness that you're actually communicating that you're upset with something that I'm doing that I didn't know. Like what a privilege that you're actually able to express this and I can hopefully receive this. And then we can actually use this conflict as a way to get closer in our relationships.
Yeah, I really appreciate you guys saying that actually, because one of the tools that I've used always is teaching, giving kids those words, I feel, instead of saying you, is I feel when you, I would like you to. So I guess that comes in with the next time. So in future, I'll use the next time, I think. And I really appreciate also you talking now about dysregulation, because I think we see a lot and also deal a lot with children that are dysregulated for a variety of reasons. So can you please help us, teachers and parents out there? What can you tell us about dysregulation? Because I also think that when the kids come in dysregulated, we as parents often and educators don't even have the tools to deal with our own dysregulation. So we could often be triggered by something that happens or that a child does because we've never learned to regulate our own emotions, especially of sort of my generation, I think. We weren't taught how to talk about our feelings and regulate our feelings, right? It was really children should be seen and not heard. That's my generation or my experience anyway. So I think that a lot of adults struggle with dysregulation too. And when you're an educator, you're dealing with a whole variety of children that come from all sorts of backgrounds, they come to school with all sorts of issues, and those issues play out every single day in classrooms and on playgrounds. And when they come in dysregulated, very often we spend probably a half a lesson just trying to get everybody on board so that we can now start teaching. So please help. How do we deal with dysregulation?
I mean, it's a massive topic and a massive question. It's huge. It's everywhere. Like you said, it affects relationships, but also a big part of it is it affects classroom learning. And you're spot on. The best thing we can do as educators and parents is to really work on regulating ourselves, because children are sponges. They absorb everything we do, not just our preferences for food and the fashion we wear and the TV shows we like and our personality, but also how we regulate our feelings. So first and foremost, it's that modeling and just some really important foundational tools that I'm using for myself, but also in with my clients is really, there's a few parts of it. One is just cognitively labeling, like what am I actually feeling right? Like being able to intellectualize and rationalize about the emotional experience that's showing up right now is a form of regulation. Just being able to clock that emotion, go, oh, I'm actually quite angry, or I'm quite tired, or upset, or sad, or guilty, is enough to be in touch with our emotions. It goes from reacting impulsively from that place of anger, let's say, to responding carefully. That's number one. And we use this with all ages. It's so foundational. Cognitively labeling. I think it's a big second part of it, and we see this in primary school kids all the time, is what do you actually feel like physically in your body? And what is the physical experience of anger right now? What in your body is telling you that you're angry? And it's universal. That's what's so beautiful about it. Anger, everyone says the color red, right? Everyone feels like fire or lava or heat rising. Everyone describes as tension across the shoulders, across the chest. So again, the more we're in touch with this, we're going to have less meltdowns or explosions. We're going to act less impulsively. We're going to act less aggressively.
And just on that, as kids get older, they start to push that feeling down as well and start to, not want to feel it because it feels uncomfortable. And so much of the work in the early years is around getting them to actually notice it, identify it, label it, and feel it. And so be comfortable with the feeling that it is a bit uncomfortable. So coming back to your idea before about failure or things that don't feel great, like it's okay that feeling is there. It might not feel good for you, but let's at least feel it first before we do something with it.
So I want to just recap that for people listening, because I think it's really important. So first we have to get kids to recognize the emotion. So it's almost that metacognition, right? To be able to recognize this is I'm feeling angry, or I'm feeling, frustrated or sad, whatever it might be. And the second is what does that feel like in your body? To actually own that feeling in your body and recognize the feeling that you've got tightness in your throat, or tightness across your chest, or your heart's racing. Okay, so now we've recognized it, and that is the first part of regulation. Now what?
Well, I'll just add to that first tool and say just labeling. I mean, there's so many layers to this as well, because, I mean, you made the point, your generation, it's often children that are seen and not heard. It's really hard. Like, I don't want to underestimate. It sounds easy in theory. It's really hard in practice, because so often we have been taught not to actually allow that emotion of anger or sadness, right? Those uncomfortable ones. So when you're asking students or you're asking clients, what's the emotion you're feeling towards, Ben for hurting you in the playground, they might go, well, Ben was maybe having a bad day. He played well, and maybe it was hot. And then suddenly, like, automatically we're rationalizing, and that's a thought, not a feeling. So you let it go, like, well, okay, that might be the case that Ben is upset and didn't eat very well, but what are you feeling here towards Ben? And suddenly they're like, oh, whoa, okay, I didn't realize that what I just said wasn't a feeling. And then you've got to, and that's where the work is really helpful in the room, but also where the work can be done with educators and parents. It's again, sounds really easy in theory. It's hard, really hard for us. And the second part as well, that whole mentality of we haven't been raised to focus on physical experience, on our emotions. We're very good at ignoring it, right? If our caregiver, if mum or dad is upset with us and they're yelling at us because I'm feeling angry, we're very quick at going, well, I'll just shut down what I'm feeling and I'll just deal with my caregiver, mum or dad, or the teacher or sibling. So easy in theory, really hard to do and difficult, especially if we've never had the experience before, to actually be in touch with our feelings in a safe and secure way.
So I guess then when we're helping children to resolve conflict, especially when they've come in after playtime or whatever, that whole idea of getting them to tap into how they are feeling and what it feels like in their body. And then I guess with the next step after that then be that whole I feel when, and that's the next step, to get them to actually talk about the way they're feeling and not to point fingers. It's how I feel. This is how I feel when this and this happens. And next time I'd like you to do this and this or this, or whatever the case might be. Would that be the right advice to give?
100%. This is why it's all linked into each other. Emotion regulation, metacognition, assertive communication. It's all part of it. And just on the flip side, if you're on the receiving end of that as well, let's say you've come into lunch, you've had a great time, and then suddenly a friend of yours is upset with you. You've also got to be pretty regulated to be able to receive that and receive someone you care about, then my friend, that's anger, and be able to view it as like, okay, well, Ben's just expressing this to me and communicating this to me. He's not attacking me. He's obviously upset and I've done something. How do I not get defensive? How do I not dismiss Ben and receive that feedback and emotion in a really productive and helpful way?
We also use the metaphor of a Coke bottle with young people. They really recognize that and they understand what happens when you shake up a Coke bottle and then you take the lid off. They love that as a concept. And when we compare that with our bodies, what happens when we get dysregulated, aside from simply saying, I felt X when you did Y, we also say to them, those bubbles are bubbling up inside you like a bottle of Coke. And when that moment of, stress or conflict or whatever it is, something that goes wrong and the lid comes off, those bubbles, the whole thing's going to explode, just like your body. And so there are some really simple foundational techniques from that, they're called tip skills, around being able to kind of lower your body temperature, for instance, or paced breathing, or do some form of physical exercise. Those are really simple techniques that an educator could use at the start of a lesson or throughout to allow some of those bubbles to come out, the air to come out of the Coke bottle in a healthy way.
That was actually going to be my next question to you guys. What are some tools or techniques that you can give educators and parents to use when they're trying to help children to regulate and also to untangle themselves from negative feelings? Are there any others that you can add to?
So many. And what Ben's talking about comes from DBT, dialectical behavioral therapy, in particular, distress tolerance skills. So what's also fun in our workshops is we don't just lecture, like Ben said earlier, we actually get students to practice and embody the learning. So we get students to use some energy, and the best way to use energy in an effective way is physical exercise. We talk about progressive muscle relaxation, or just tensing and relaxing your muscles, just getting really used to, again, what does tension and emotion feel like in each body part. A body scan, deep breathing, lowering body temperature, as Ben said. Visualization can be really helpful.
And if you take all of those different tools, the common denominator with all of them, I guess the implementation of them for an educator, something you want to be thinking about regularly is, how can I adapt this skill or this tool for any environment? So it's one thing to be able to say to a student, hey, a really useful technique is to meditate, for instance. If I'm in the middle of a maths test and I know that I haven't studied for that maths test and I'm starting to become dysregulated, I can't go to the other room, put my fingers up in the air and start meditating in that moment for 10 minutes. So how could I use one of these tools, like tensing and relaxing one body part during that maths test or during a conflict? That is really adaptable, because it's something you could tense your fist under the table or clench your toes or a part of your leg, for instance, and then relax it and feel that sense of relaxation spread to the other parts of your body without disrupting the whole class or doing a run around the block just to get some of that energy out. So thinking through, okay, is this tool connective and adaptive in certain scenarios?
So what I hear you saying is that teachers need a toolkit to use and to give to children in different scenarios or situations, whether that be, as you said, we can't just stop them less than midway and, oh, let's now all go run around the oval. They need different techniques and tools that they can use in specific situations to help them deal with whatever emotion is arising. So this then means that as teachers, we really need a whole quiver of arrows and knowledge to help all these children that we teach, because they're all coming in with different needs, which then tells me that as schools, teachers all need training like conflict resolution and dealing with anxiety and all these other things that kids are coming to school with, in that it's not just a teacher's job anymore just to deliver curriculum. It's now also our job to be little mini psychologists in our classrooms. And so we need tools and training, I think, in order to do that. And I know this is just one little way, one podcast that we can do that. But for those teachers and parents too, because I found for me as a parent starting out, they say small children, small problems, big children, big problems. As they go through and they get to those teenage years, you've got a whole other kettle of fish, other problems to deal with. But just in a little nutshell, give us some things that we can have in our toolbox that we can use to help kids.
Yeah. So we often talk to teachers. We're in schools every day. And I think Ben will agree with me that, teachers are the heroes, the superstars. They are doing so much, and they need to be appreciated more. Like you said, they're not just teaching, they're doing the mini psychologists. They've got so much on their plate, and we really see that. In terms of kind of what tools we can offer, really a lot of other ones we've covered. So really thinking about that emotion regulation, toolbox of the things we covered, from DBT, being able to cognitively label the feelings, being able to embody and helping students and kids express them in healthy ways. A big part of it, like we said at the beginning, is also being aware of students' cognitions and thoughts, right? And if we can teach students certain thinking style. This is very classic CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy of what are the common thinking patterns that they're going to get in the way in today's lesson, out on the playground, at the sports field, on the weekend with friends at home. We can encourage students, again, that metacognition, to start thinking about their thinking. That's going to empower students to be able to go into that environment, whatever it is, catch that unhelpful thought, that fortune telling, that mind reading, be able to respond to it, challenge it, and balance that in a really productive way and continue on with what they're doing. So there's the emotion regulation aspect of it. There's the cognitive restructuring, and then there's also dealing with conflict, how to actually encourage and empower students to use the right words to navigate conflicts.
And I might just add to that, systems move and change slowly. They take a lot of time to change. And ultimately, I think we're seeing that change happening now in education. Unfortunately, things like classrooms, as you mentioned at the start of this conversation, haven't. We're still in a, industrial society kind of situation where kids are all facing the front with a bell every hour, you wearing the same uniform, all that sort of stuff, and they're not learning in different environments, outside, those sorts of things. But one thing that is starting to shift, which I think you're touching on here, is the role of the educator and the teacher. Whereas in years gone by, it was to teach maths or English or whatever your subject area expertise is. And I think we're now seeing more and more schools understand the importance of social emotional learning, well-being, and the whole child, and preparing them for life beyond year 12 and just their ATAR score. However, what that means is, you're right, teachers do need more in their social and emotional toolbox and different ways of educating and working with students. The role, and even the word teacher, implies that someone is going to teach something and they're going to impart wisdom or knowledge or learning in the area that they know best. But I think what we are starting to see some brilliant teachers out there doing is not just teaching by talking, but teaching by listening and role modeling the skill of actually letting the person share what's going on for them. And I think while there's some amazing tools that David's just shared as well that teachers can start to use, we know that young people, whether they are in primary school, middle school, or high school, often there's so much going on for them inside that they want to share. And instead of being told how to feel, don't worry about it, or it'll be fine, and telling them the outcome, one of the tools we need our teachers to hear is around listening and being able to provide space for young people to share openly and honestly, and often not even have to have an answer. I mean, you brought up the idea of parents and little kids, bigger problems. It's like, sometimes you just want to be able to talk and share it and not necessarily have the answer. It's just a microphone and an ear to listen to. So yeah, I think that's a powerful one that teachers can use as well.
I think that's very, very true. I was, as I've mentioned before, teaching health for the last 2 years, to years 3 to 6. Very many of my lessons would simply be kids just wanting to be heard, just talking, just conversations. They really do. I find that they have a dire need to actually express their feelings and say how they're feeling, because I don't know if they're getting that at home very often. They need a space to be able to just talk and have non-judgmental listening. I think I have found that to be true, is that they love to talk about themselves and they want to actually say how they feel. And sometimes it's frightening to hear these things as a teacher, because sometimes you don't even know how to respond. But I find they don't really want a response very often. They just want you to be a sounding board, I think. So I think that's really important. Very many people said to me when I was coming out the classroom, gosh, you're not going to make as much of an impact teaching health. And in some respects, that's true. But in others, I thought, crikey, no, actually, this is a massive impact, because mental well-being is so huge now. And I just found that children just wanted to be heard. Yeah.
Absolutely. And a huge part of our workshop is, and before we even get to the tools, is just creating a space for, again, doesn't matter what age the students are, just to normalize and validate. And going on the Coke bottle, like, who in your life shakes up your Coke bottle? And just kind of sharing it and celebrating it, that of course people in our lives, people we love, shake up our Coke bottle, our friends, our parents, our teachers, ourselves even. And also what situations shake up your curriculum too. Just having that space to just normalize it and let it out is so, like you said, it's just what students need, or kids need.
And unfortunately, from 8:30 till 3:30, there's so much that's crammed in the day in the lessons for kids to learn, and we have to get through so much. Often they're operating at like 30 or 40% of their capacity because they're dealing with so many emotions or thoughts that haven't moved. They haven't got out of their bodies or their minds. When in reality, if we're able to create those preconditions for learning by allowing them the space to talk or share or, get some of those things off their chest, we might be able to bump them up to 70 or 80 or 90%. We might not achieve as much as we want, but at least they'll be cognitively, aware, listening, engaging, and showing up to class ready to learn.
We can't take parents out of the conversation. It's a three-way little triangle of communication and language and relationships. But what role do the parents play in supporting children, and how can schools and teachers collaborate better with families to get their support for children? What have you found?
I mean, parents play a huge role. Absolutely. They're there from the very beginning. And like I said before, children are sponges. And the biggest people they're learning from are their parents. So parents play a huge role. And it's hard. Like, parents also have to set boundaries and try and shape their children to be good, young, healthy, well-functioning adults. It's hard. Plus they're working, plus they're providing, plus they're cleaning, they're running their own little small business. There's a lot going on for parents. So, I mean, the approach that we take and psychology takes is it's never about blaming and going, okay, well, that's because mum and dad did this and spoke in this way. Everyone's trying their best. Absolutely, everyone's trying their best, and we know parents are as well. And most parenting and method is probably just passed down from what they experienced too. So, and when you're tired and when you're stressed, what kicks in is just what you know. And this is where education, psychoeducation, plays a really big role in going, okay, maybe this is what we were shown and taught throughout our childhood and from our parents, but there are some things that can really go a long way. And offering support, offering content, offering workshops. A big thing that we see as well is naturally parents come from a loving place. They see their child in distress in whatever way. They come home and their child's telling about an issue in the playground and they didn't do well in the classroom or whatever's going on. From that loving place, parents go, they get anxious and go, okay, I'm very anxious, I'm feeling stressed. How do I fix this? And parents and all of us are very quick to jump to problem solving mode. We want to try and fix. And like we said, sometimes from that place of wanting to fix and problem solve, we unintentionally, one, dismiss our children's emotions, but two, also rob kids of the opportunity to actually figure it out for themselves. I mean, you said it so nicely before. Kids often don't need to be told the solution. They can figure it out themselves. They're pretty handy and resourceful. They just need to feel heard first and foremost and feel safe and secure. And then when they feel heard and validated in their experience, often you see it all the time. Often the answer or the solution or that course of action comes spontaneously from that place of like, okay, well, here's what I need to do. Maybe I can study a bit harder. Maybe I can invite my friend over, or maybe I can ask my teacher for my help after the class.
And part of that as well is, like you were saying before, how much a parent or an educator can inflame something through their own dysregulation. So feeling those emotions and being able to identify cognitively what you're experiencing as the child, or the student says something to you or is going through what they're going through, to be able to sit in that discomfort for yourself as well, because there's two people in that interaction, the parent and the child, or the staff member and the child and the student. So being able to be aware of what you're feeling first and recognize, well, I actually need to regulate my own emotions first before I help them.
And I think also what you just said as well is very important, in that so often the first thing a child thinks that they should do is, tell a teacher. And so with my students, I always go, no, please don't come and tell me first. You've got to first try and work it out yourself using those techniques that we've taught them, that I've taught them. I feel da-da-da-da-da. And then if you can't sort it out and you still feel like you need help, that's when you come to the teacher and say, I couldn't figure out this problem. We're having problems. Can you help us? But I think that you're right. So often we try and jump in as parents and teachers to try and solve the problem for kids. But we have to give them some power and autonomy for them to try and sort it out for themselves first. I think that's really important because we don't give them enough credit. And so we get this perpetual circle of every day, oh, I'm going to tell the teacher, I'm going to tell the teacher, and they come running to you with all their problems. But really, we've got to help them solve their own problems. I think that's the bottom line, and to give them the tools and the resources for them to do that effectively. Would you agree with that?
100%.
Great. Gentlemen, I think this has been a really powerful conversation, and one that I really hope every school and teacher listens to. So we need to share this conversation far and wide. Just share with us before we go and before we sign off the tools and resources and the workshops that Toolbox Education offers to schools and I guess parents as well and students to help them navigate this new world of ours and the anxiety and the feelings that kids are feeling.
So we run workshops for year 1 through to year 12. In the junior years, the primary years, focusing on emotion literacy, managing meltdowns, and understanding how our anxieties affect our social situations and interactions. In the middle years, we look at more emotion regulation skills as we're entering a new environment in the middle school, how we understand our anxieties and the videos that play in our minds about interactions. And as we move into the senior school, we look at things like dealing with conflict, overcoming procrastination, and self-critical thoughts that pop up for a lot of students as they're approaching year 11 and 12 and wondering where they're going to go in their lives. We run each of those workshops as well for parents and staff, and schools, educators can find us at toolboxeducation.com and on Instagram, LinkedIn, TikTok, Facebook, you name it.
And just another thing as well, we provide the workshop to teach the tools, but we really want to scaffold and continue the learning. So with every workshop, we have, 6 to 10 weeks where it was follow-up activities that have been goals by myself and I mean, in consultation with teachers as well. So it's not just a sugar hit, it's kids can learn it and practice it. So it just becomes automatic. And you see it becomes second nature. We can start to challenge our thoughts immediately. We can start to regulate ourselves automatically.
And last but not least, we also have a toolbox clinic. So we understand that the preventative measures are really important in these workshops to equip students with the tools. But we also know that some students and staff and parents, adults, are going to need that support as well. So we have a team of psychologists that have client sessions, both face-to-face and telehealth.
And this is all over Australia?
So we're located in Melbourne. That's where we're based, in the southeast, but we offer telehealth.
Ben and David, you are doing an amazing, wonderful job. I just commend everything that you're doing as a teacher and as a parent too. I know how important this is. It's something that we are dealing with more and more every single day because of, I guess, social media is having a massive influence on children and their mental health. And I cannot overstate how important your work is that you're doing for children and parents and educators. So on behalf of everybody, I'd like to thank you for your work that you're doing. And I will share all your links in the show notes so people can get hold of you if they need to. And I'd just like to thank you for reaching out and coming on to Blooming Curious today to share your advice and your knowledge with our listeners today. So that was Ben and David from Toolbox Education. I hope that you found today's episode as interesting as I have. And if you did, please share this episode far and wide with everyone you know, because today's episode was really such an important one for our children and teachers and parents everywhere. We all need as much help as we can to help our children and ourselves with the emotions and anxieties and the meltdowns that we experience just about every single day. So thanks for listening. We'll be back next week, same time, same place. And until then, stay blooming curious. And don't forget to click that share button and share this episode right now with someone that you know.